I was trying to find a scholarship. I thought that if I came to the US, I would get a scholarship. And as you guys will know, when you start your business, whatever you see in your mind's eye that is fueled by the passion that resides in your heart will manifest. So I did get my scholarship and I went to UMass Amherst. My intent there was to party, and Big Mama succeeded heavily as well in that front. When I left, I initially thought I was going to pursue a degree in medicine, but then I realized that I should not be in a job where me showing up on time could save or make or break someone's life. No one's life should depend on me getting to a place on time. So I was like, medicine ain't it, Big Mama. You got to find something else. And so I ended up becoming going into law. I became a corporate healthcare attorney where I was licensing pharmacies all over the country, third party administrators, utilization, you name it, I was licensing it in every state. And as you would imagine, that gave me a little superpower that I didn't think was anything when I was going through it. When I transitioned into cannabis, it became everything. And so it allowed me to start a company with some partners in California, one called Chill Hill Bean Co., another one called Albert Einstein's, which is a manufacturing and cultivation facility. Our products in are about 166 stores in California right now. Then we came over to Massachusetts, where I formed Major Bloom, which is this logo that you see here. We have 3 provisional licenses in the state, 2 for product manufacturing, 1 for retail. We also have our delivery pre-certification. And then this is what I'm very proud of is I have the Legally Great podcast, which is a podcast that I created with the purpose of elevating consciousness by showing people that there is nothing that's impossible. Like the only thing that prevents you from accomplishing your dreams are the self-limiting thoughts in your mind. And the podcast begins with one of my friends from high school explaining how she was able to cure her breast cancer within 6 months just by removing all the negativities in her life. So it's powerful. Okay, and now you're like, Lori, I did not come here to learn about the energies. I came here to learn about the vibes from the weed. I got you. I'm getting there. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to start by briefly giving you an overview of how the market is doing in Massachusetts. Then I'm going to break it down 7 steps that you're going to have to go through in order for you to establish your marijuana establishment. In Massachusetts, marijuana businesses, if they're licensed, they're called marijuana establishments. Okay. So if you hear me say marijuana establishment, I'm talking about dispensaries, cultivation facilities, all of them. You following? Give me a nod if you're following. See, Big Mama. Yeah. Okay, so we're going. On y va. So let's go. Massachusetts adult use market. You guys have probably you probably saw what took place in this industry, right? Where we are financially. But before I get to where we are financially, let's talk about how we got here. So we, the people, decided that we were tired of our young men and our young women being dragged to prison and having our neighborhoods destroyed because of a plant which we all know was used heavily in America up until the 1920s when the Mexicans came over and they wanted to criminalize them, right? We remember that. So we're like, let's cut it out. We're going to decriminalize marijuana. So we did that in 2008. And then in 2012, we realized, well, decriminalization is insufficient because there are people who are suffering real ailments and they need to have a real program and a real system through which they can access their medicine that's safe, right? And so we, the people, said, we want patients to have access. So we legalized medical in 2012. But what happened between 2008 and 2016? The rate of arrest for marijuana was 4 times greater for a black person than it was for a white person. And in America, white and black people consume cannabis at the same rate. So something was fishy. It showed us that decriminalization was insufficient to stop these police officers from dragging our sons, dragging our daughters to prison. So we said we're going to put a stop to it, right? That's what we did. So in 2016, we legalized marijuana. So it was a great thing, right? 2016, we legalized, we elected Trump, and then the universe balances everything. So we got weed to deal with it. So I don't know, I wasn't complaining at all. So you guys, all right. So you guys are like, who let this lady teach this class? Well, you're here. So you're stuck with me. All right. And so in 2017, they implemented legislation, and we are now here. So how much money have they made so far off legalization? So since they started operating in 2018, they have made $1 billion in sales. Do you know how many of those companies were owned by company economic empowerment applicants? One. One black owned, and that poor company, it opened right before COVID. It opened in February, and COVID said, "You thought you about to make this bread? I'm sorry for making the jokes, but you gotta laugh to keep you from crying, right? But this is where we are in Massachusetts, okay? And we're looking at this is these are the statistics for marijuana arrests. Up until between 2001 and 2010, they arrested 8.2 million people for marijuana. That's and then of that 8.2 million, 88% was for possession. A lot of people have this misconception that they're arresting El Chapo. El Chapo, no. El Chapo can get his homies out of prison. Who they're arresting are the young kids who are using this cannabis as a medicine to deal with anxiety, to cope with life, right? Those are the people they're arresting, not the big dealers. Just for us to be on the same page and outrage. And if you want to get into this industry, understand that it's your right, and you actually have to get into it so that you can diversify it with your thought of unity. You feel me? Getting into this cannabis is your civic duty. You have to serve. All right, let's go. I mentioned blacks are 3.9 times more likely, and it's costing Massachusetts residents over $9 million to enforce these marijuana laws. Meanwhile, Ray Ray can't read. Okay. Jacob's teeth fucked up. He can't get access to dental, and we out here arresting people for marijuana. Can we get our priorities straight? I shouldn't be talking about my cousins, I know, but all right. Let's get so we set the foundation. You see where we are in terms of the market. We know how we got here through decriminalization, through medical legalization, and then through legalization of adult use. Now, what does adult use regulation actually mean? Let's get started. We're going to talk about the process. The Massachusetts process for licensing is broken up into two phases. There's a phase that's a state phase, and there are some parts that you have to take place on the municipal, meaning on the city or town level. Now let's start with how this industry is regulated. First, on the state level, these are the people. Unfortunately, they left the party who regulate marijuana in the state. The Cannabis Control Commission is responsible for doing that, and these are the commissioners. But Kay Doyle stepped down, and Britt McBride stepped down recently, so we're left with three. In terms of the municipal, on the city or town level, their authority varies. But that authority that they've been given authority by the statute where they're allowed to regulate the time, place, and manner in which these establishments operate their businesses within the jurisdiction. You feel me? So in other words, you have to get state approval, but the municipalities have tremendous authority over regulations. And if you guys have been following the news, most of the issues that are taking place with economic empowerment applicants, individuals who've been most harmed by the war on drugs from accessing the marijuana industry, it's happening on the local level. It is on the local level that people are receiving bribes. It's on the local level that things are so convoluted and twisted to navigate that people are getting lost and never find their way through licensing. So it's important to understand the municipal level. All right. So what are the phases? Let me give you a big overview of what the parts are. So what do you need on that municipal level, on the city or town? Well, the Cannabis Control Commission said, if you want to get a license to operate a marijuana establishment, you need to go to the city or town where you're operating, and you need to get these 4 things. And you need to provide proof of these 4 things in your state application. So first, you're going to have to secure real estate, which is extremely expensive to do, meaning that you're going to have to hold on to this piece of real estate throughout the entire licensing process, which can extend over a year, you guys. That's why people who've been most harmed are not entering this space. It's expensive. You also have to have a community outreach meeting. This is a meeting where you invite the neighbors to come. I always say yell at you, but I'm not allowed to. People yell at me when I say that. They can come and ask you questions and talk about, and you explain to them what your business is. You also have to negotiate an agreement between the town and you. This is where things get fishy, because what are the rules for negotiating that agreement? Who gets it? Is there priority for economic empowerment? Do you give it to people just because they have more experience? Usually when they give to people because they have more experience is because they were able to operate in other states. In other words, they got more money. You following me? We don't know, like there is no uniform method for obtaining a host agreement. It's different from, there's 351 cities and towns. There's 351 different ways to get a host agreement in the state. Y'all following me? All right, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. The fourth thing that you need to get, you need to show the state that you understand the laws that are going to apply to you on that local or city level. So you're going to submit a plan to comply with the local zoning code, ordinance, and bylaws. So once you have those four things, you got your piece of real estate, you've conducted your outreach meeting, you have your host agreement, you have your plan to comply with local zoning, then you can go to the Cannabis Control Commission website. It's an online application. It initially was broken down into these 3 packets. It's still in those packets, but they just put it into one gigantic form now. But essentially, there's a section of the application that's an application of intent where you talk about who you are, what who the persons of the controlling persons are. You provide basic information about the property and things of that sort. Then everybody has to undergo a background check. And you guys, if you're saying, Big Mama, this is a lot, remember I said it was an overview. We're gonna dive a little deeper. Okay, we're gonna I'm just putting the seasoning in right now. So by the time we get to it, it already done marinated in your mind. You feel me? It's ready, it's cooked. So this is just a little rubric for you. Let's go. So your state application, you have the application of intent, you have your background check packet, you also have a management and operations profile where you basically tell the CCC how you intend to manage and operate your business. Okay, so if you have these 7 steps, you can submit your application, and fees do not apply on this level to economic empowerment applicants and social equity applicants. So the application is free for those individuals. All right. So this marijuana establishment licensing process, where do you even start? I mean, I told you about the 7 steps. How do you even begin this process? Is that what you guys are wondering? Don't call me a mind reader, okay? All right. The first step, I mean, and you can go, I'm going to break it down in these. You can actually go in any order, really, for the most part. It's not literally that step, but this is the way I like to think about it. So first, you want to identify PEDICs and assess suitability. And you're like, Lori, what's a PEDIC? I'm glad you asked. A PEDIC, just to get you started, is a person or entity having direct or indirect control in your business. So you have to identify, see, I told you, Cardi B confused, this man confused. They were like, what's a PEDIC? I got y'all, relax. All right. A PEDIC is a person or entity having direct or indirect control over the marijuana establishment. Okay. So are you following? It's anybody, everybody who has direct or indirect control. That covers a lot of people. I'm going to break that down further for you, but understand some limitations. If you do fall under the category of being a PEDIC, you can only have 3 licenses in each license type in the state. There's this thing called the no hoarding rule, where you can only have 3 retail licenses, 3 cultivation licenses, 3 product manufacturing licenses. Remember, you're capped. There are some license types where you can't have more than one, like a marijuana cooperative. You can only have one of those, or a micro business. You can only have one of those. But apart from that, there's a 3 license max to everybody. You following? Any questions? I'm going to keep going. So I said a PEDIC is a person who has direct or indirect control. What does it mean to have direct control? Well, you have direct control in a business if you own 10% financial interest in the business, meaning like you don't necessarily need to have a say in how they control the business, but the fact that you have a right to receive 10% of the profits, that makes you an owner. If you have 10% of voting rights, so now you're talking about the right to control the major decisions of the business or the right to veto significant events, you're a PEDIC. If you're a close associate, now I'm gonna tell you something. Even the CCC don't know what a close associate is. I tried to call them once and I put somebody as a close associate on my application. They were like, yo, we don't really know what that means. Just put it under PEDIC. I was like, then why is it there? Y'all play too much, but I'm going to keep going. So, but a close associate is anybody who has any relevant managerial, operational, or financial interest in the business. Do you see how broad that is? That covers basically anybody. By virtue of that interest or power, can exercise significant influence over the management, operations, or finances of a marijuana establishment. I mean, according to this definition, the manager of a marijuana establishment could be an owner, right? So it's very broad, and I think that's why they stay away from trying to even apply it. The other method that you can be a direct controller is by having contractual or other authority to control, meaning that you have the right to control some of the major decisions of the business by right of being of your job or through a contractual relationship. So this relationship gives you the right to make major decisions regarding operations, strategic planning, capital allocations, acquisitions, and divestments. If the person has the right to appoint 50% or more of your directors, if they're appointing or removing corporate level officers, if they can make major marketing, production, and financial decisions, if they can execute significant or exclusive contracts, if they're earning 10% or more of your profits or dividends, they have direct control. Do you remember why the in the beginning when the CCC first drafted these regulations, they did not define a PEDIC like this. The reason they went so in depth at this definition is because when they first started the industry, there were a lot of predatory lenders that were coming into the state and using people of color, using economic empowerment applicants as the faces of these businesses, all while giving them these outrageous loans where they would default, and then that company would end up owning the business. You know what I mean? And so in order to protect these people, the Cannabis Control Commission updated the definition of PEDIC to ensure that we understand that you can't just pull up and think that you can control in all these other ways. Now, I said there's a direct control. This is indirect control. You are a PEDIC via indirect control. And mind you, they don't treat you differently whether you get this control directly or indirectly. It don't matter how you get it, long as you get it. Okay. So as long as you have this control directly or indirectly, you're a PEDIC. So an indirect control is if you are a person with controlling interest in the holding or parent company of the applicant, or you're the CEO or executive director of those companies, or you're any person in a position to indirectly control the decision making of the business. So you see how like these terms of PEDIC is really broad. Now we just define what a PEDIC are. There are some specific lines of businesses that we're going to talk about that have additional restrictions to them, and I want you guys to be mindful. If you own any financial interest in a laboratory in the state, you can't own any other marijuana businesses. That means you can't own retail, you can't cultivate, you can't do anything else. So if you own an independent testing laboratory, that's all you could do. Also, if you're looking into cultivation, even though you have 3 locations, you're capped at 100,000 square feet. So you have to split that 100,000 square feet between 3 locations. Um, and so this just summarizes it. And let me know, you guys, if you need these slides.
Yeah, Laura, if you can send those to me after and I'll send them around to everyone, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'll be $1,000. Just kidding, you guys. You get a discount tonight. It's free. But wait, I always wanted to do an infomercial. But wait, you get this. One day. All right. So where realm are we? We're in step 1. We're choosing our team, right? We're finding out who is a PEDIC. Once you found out they're PEDIC, do you know that not everybody in the planet is allowed to be a PEDIC in Massachusetts? Meaning not everybody can own or operate or control a marijuana establishment. There are some restrictions. Here are the relevant restrictions. First, in order for you to be a PEDIC in Massachusetts, you have to be at least 21 years old. So that's a given, right? The next one is you can't have any criminal disqualifications. And this part pisses me off because I truly believe that if I paid my debt, I should be free to do whatever I want, right? So if I went to jail and I paid my price there, why do I still have to keep paying by being unable to finance my life and make it and create an income or pathway for my family? But I know what y'all are thinking. Lori, get off your soapbox, okay? I'm here to learn how to get these marijuana businesses. I got you. I'm gonna get back to it. Let's go. So, what are some of these disqualifications? First, if at the time that you're applying for your application for your marijuana application, you have any unresolved criminal proceedings, it means that you have open cases. Except if it's an open case for marijuana, you cannot apply. You're mandatorily disqualified. So until you resolve it, you can't apply. Now, this only applies during the time of application. but there are some indefinite mandatory disqualifications. That means that for the rest of your life, you will never be able to participate in the marijuana industry. And that is if you are a sex offender, if you have a sex offender registration, if you have some felony convictions, including felony weapons violations with narcotics, felony violence. So basically, all felony charges, almost nearly all felony charges, except those involving marijuana. There are some non-felony weapons charges that are involved, but when it comes to felonies, you're out. Also, a conviction when you of distribution to a minor. They do not like you selling drugs to kids. Okay, so forever banned. Now, I said these are mandatory, but there are some things that can be a blotch. Like you're presumptively disqualified, but if you provide enough information to the CCC, they can say, "Oh, I get it. You're not actually, going to mess this thing up," and you can actually move forward in the application process. So presumptive negative suitability exists at any time. So if you have a non-felony weapons violation, including firearms involving narcotics, so firearms and for firearms crimes, if you have felony convictions, like I mentioned before, and this is an interesting one, if you have multiple crimes of operating under the influence. So if you have two offenses within a 10-year period or three or more offenses within a period of time, then you are presumptively presumptively disqualified. And then there's one that exists at the present moment. So if you have open unresolved marijuana charges, there's a presumption of there's a presumption that you're disqualified. Also, if, like, for example, I'm a lawyer, if they look up at on the board of bar overseers and they see that I have some professional violations on my legal license, that might prevent me from getting a license in marijuana. So you ain't it ain't safe, it ain't safe. Cardi B knew what she was talking about. Or all right, so let's keep going. Um and again, I'm gonna send you guys this. You don't have to memorize it all, but there are some. So even there's some things that exist if it's in the preceding 5 years. So if it happened 6 years before, you're safe. But if it's 5 years before you apply, for example, if you have multiple criminal complaints that separately would not result in a negative determination, but if they take together, it looks like you're a bad apple. Like, say you keep disturbing the peace at your neighbor's house, like just messing with your neighbors. Well, that can keep you from getting a marijuana charge, because individually messing with your neighbor is not bad. But if you have a history of harassment, that's that's really going to impede your ability to get into this space. Also, crimes of domestic violence, um, that gets you disqualified if it occurred in the previous 5 years. Um, if you posed a threat to public health and safety before. The mandatory disqualifications for the previous 5 years, I got to keep track of time, are things involving your marijuana registration license. So if you have a marijuana registration license and like it gets taken away or it gets revoked, you will be banned from the industry for like 5 years. So y'all be safe. Play nice. Remember I talked about presumptive negative suitability, and I was like, you can show some things that help the CCC determine that you're better, so that you're not disqualified anymore if you have a presumptive negative suitability determination. Well, these are the things that the CCC considers when they're figuring out whether to approve you. They'll look at the time since the offense was committed, the age you were when you committed the crime, the nature and specific circumstances surrounding the incident, the sentence that was imposed, if any. Was there criminal? Was there incarceration? Was it criminal? Any penalty or discipline that was imposed? The relationship of the offense to the nature of the work to be performed, the number of incidents that you committed, um, whether you committed the crimes while you were addicted to drugs and then now you've since recovered. If criminal, do you have any evidence that you're rehabilitated? Like if you're robbing people, do you show now that you got a successful business and you're hiring people, or you haven't robbed anybody, or been caught for robbing anybody? You just have to really um, provide this information. Last thing, if you are a PEDIC, you have to get training every year. That was a lot. How do you guys feel? You guys feel good about knowing how to choose your team now, right? You're gonna find out if they have direct or indirect control. Are they 21? And do they have they committed any crimes, or have they committed any offense that might prevent them from participating? Once you've done that, they're ready to be put on your application. Okay. Next step, you're gonna choose the marijuana business type. Okay. Do you guys know the various business types that we have? You want me to go through them a little bit? I'm not gonna. How does this differ for the delivery only license? I'm sorry, I don't know what this is, only because I missed that part. If you could just let me know right now,
Yeah,
I
sorry,
can.
Lori, I missed that one. I got you.
No worries. So when you're picking your marijuana business type, there are 10 business establishments in the state, 10 business licenses that you can apply for. Like I mentioned before, marijuana businesses are called marijuana establishments in the state when they're licensed. One thing that people don't think about when you're choosing your marijuana business type, you have to think about taxes. And that's because of this IRS code called IRS Tax Code 280E. And I'm going to break down, I'm going to talk about that and talk about how it relates to choosing your business types. But let me talk briefly over the 10 marijuana business types that exist in the state. The first one is your marijuana cultivators. And that is exactly like what it sounds like. It allows you to distribute your products that you've cultivated. It allows you to cultivate your own products and distribute them to business to business. You cannot deliver to consumers if you have a cultivator license, unless you also have a delivery only retailer license. Y'all following? Bueno. A marijuana product manufacturer. You guys probably know what that is. This is a company, this license is like to me crazy because in some states they've broken it down, broken that type license type into various forms. It allows you to extract marijuana, infuse marijuana, package it, and deliver it to other businesses. So so it allows you to do those things. That's what a product manufacturer allows you to do. So it's your kitchen, it's your extractions, your infusions. Next, you have these next two types of licenses, 3 and 4. I like to call them my BOGOs, my buy one, get one free. Because in these two license types, you get two different licenses in one. In the first one, the Craft Marijuana Cooperative, I like to call it a macro business. The reason I do that is because the intent of this license is for it to be large. I'll explain. This Craft Marijuana Cooperative allows you to have 100,000 square feet of cultivation. And remember when I started, I said you can only have 3 locations? Well, when it comes to the Craft Marijuana Cooperative, you can have an unlimited number of locations out of which you cultivate. You just cannot, you just can't exceed 100,000 square feet. It also allows you to make infused products. That product manufacturer license, that's wrapped in there too. You can have 3 of those locations. So the Craft Marijuana Cooperative, the macro business, is a BOGO. You get 100,000 square feet of cultivation plus you get 3 product manufacturing locations. Only things, you guys, you have to have 1 farmer on the team, and everybody on the team has to be Massachusetts residents. So if the macro business is supposed to be large, what the micro business? It's supposed to be small, right? So this micro business is just like the craft, except you can only have a 5,000 square feet of cultivation in 1 location that you make infusions out of. So it's a BOGO, it's a cultivator and a product manufacturer, but they just have to be smaller. And then this one, only half of the pedics have to be from Massachusetts. And then these ones, marijuana retailers, the dispensaries, the research facilities is the license that allows you to conduct research. What most people don't know, that when you own a marijuana product manufacturing facility, you can't actually taste your own product because the marijuana regulations prevent you from consuming cannabis on the premises. So by that condition, you're not allowed to make your gummies and then test them and see how they work. So how are these people testing the products that they're selling you? Have you ever thought about that? And if you look up the Cannabis Control Commission website, how many of these businesses have research facility licenses? So the answer is I'm not Tekashi 69. So don't come for me looking for me to be snitching on people, okay? Let me move on. Marijuana transporter licenses. The marijuana transporter allows you to act like, so I love this license. First, it allows you to transport marijuana from business to business. You can't deliver to consumers, but it also allows you to buy marijuana for the purpose of warehousing and storing it and transferring it to other marijuana businesses. The reason why this is awesome, it's like the best middleman license. It doesn't require large startup costs because all you need is a warehouse. and warehouse and some trucks, very small car. You don't need bit large cars, and you can have companies. You can have license. You can have companies white label products for you and make exclusive products that only you carry. And on top of that, not only do you carry it, you deliver it directly to their door. So it's like it's an amazing service. I know that when this market gets more saturated, these transporters are going to be vital to allow businesses and distributors to sift through all the crappy weed that might potentially be in the space and get the top product. So it's also one of the most slept on licenses. I think last I checked, there was probably three of them that have provisional licenses in the state. So I'm going to stop selling it. But there are two types. There's one where if you already have a marijuana business, say I have a marijuana dispensary, but I also want to provide this service on behalf of other dispensaries. They don't have an existing licensing transporter license. If I want to just do this on my own and I don't have any other marijuana business, then I'd be a third party transporter. All right. So the next license type are the laboratories. So every product that's sold in Massachusetts has to be able to be tested, and it has to be tested before being sold. So the businesses that do the testing are independent testing laboratories. The standards testing laboratory is a snitching laboratory. Basically, if the independent testing laboratories are not acting accordingly, the CCC will send the standards testing laboratory to ensure that the independent testing laboratories procedures are compliant and in order. Like I mentioned before, if you own an interest in these laboratories, you can't be a PEDIC in any other marijuana establishment type. The next two licenses are social consumption and delivery only retailer. Now, these two licenses there is an exclusivity period that applies to them, meaning that not every person in Massachusetts will be allowed to apply for these licenses. These licenses have been secured for economic empowerment applicants and social equity applicants. Economic empowerment applicants were a group of applicants who were able to fit in a window in 2018 where the CCC was issuing these certificates. They are no longer issuing them. There are 123 of them, and that's all there will ever be. I know it's unfortunate, but they're part of that group. The other group are social equity applicants. Now, this is something that's open and it's on an ongoing basis. The CCC, you qualify for the social equity program if you have a marijuana charge, your sibling or spouse has a marijuana charge, or you live in one of 29 neighborhoods that they've identified as being most harmed by the war on drugs, and I think your income is within 100% of the federal poverty level. And so those are the two requirements for the social equity program. If you get accepted in the program, you then become eligible to apply for the delivery only retailer licenses. And the exclusivity period will last for 3 years. If at the end of these 3 years, the CCC determines that it has not achieved its goal at establishing a diverse and inclusive marijuana industry, they can extend it for another 3 years. So it's very beneficial to anybody here if you don't have a social equity certificate to see if you can actually obtain one. I don't believe that applications are open now, but you can go on the CCC website and put your name in their mailing list so that when it does become open, you can get that information and apply. All right. Remember I said taxation is going to be important when we're talking about these 10 license types when you're figuring out which business you want to start. Do you know why I said that? Does anybody have any idea? Good, because I like teaching people new things. Okay, so there is this tax code 280E. It prevents marijuana businesses from receiving deductions or credits for any of their business related expenses. What that mean, Big Mama? I'm glad you asked. If you're running any regular business, like my homie, you have the restaurant. When you're filing your taxes, don't you deduct your light? You deduct your bills, the electricity, you deduct employees, you deduct rent, you deduct all of that, right? And then what's left over is what you pay taxes on. Now imagine running your restaurant, but the only thing you could deduct was the cost of acquiring the food. All you could deduct was just the cost of the vegetables and the fruits. You couldn't deduct the cost of the electricity. You could not deduct the cost of your employees. What would your taxes look like? Crazy.
Crazy. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Here we go into the cannabis industry. In marijuana, when you're dealing in the retail, okay, retail sale of marijuana, you cannot deduct anything except the cost of acquiring the marijuana or marijuana product. That means that if you're buying products for $500,000 a year, but then your OPEX is like 3 million a year, you're only deducting that 500,000. And you can't deduct anything else, not your employees, not your electricity. There are some slight deductions for inventory. So when you're going into retail, yeah, these people are making $1 million a month, right? Say 12 million a year, but their effective tax rate is now 70%. So they end up paying $8.4 million on that 12 million on taxes and get left with about 4 million. So I'm not going to tell you guys that a lot of operators are struggling to make it because of taxation in retail. So a lot of, it's not that you can't be successful in retail. Obviously, I'm in retail because, there's still a lot of money, but it's not like I don't want people to have their hearts broken when it comes time to paying Uncle Sam. I retract that. He ain't never been an uncle to me. He just takes my money. Let's go. Let's go back. But then cultivators and product manufacturers, they can actually, so when you're making a product, the cost of goods sold is everything it costs you to make the product. So unlike retail where you're not making anything, when you're product manufacturing, when you're cultivating, all your costs are the part of the cost of goods sold, because that's the cost of creating the product you intend to sell. So you can include inventory, you can include electricity, you can include your water bill, you can include employees, and you can deduct a lot more. And so your taxes end up being less when you're in a cultivation or product manufacturing situation. Y'all following? Good. So these are your considerations when you're and then also when it comes to Massachusetts taxes, the taxes only apply to retailers. Only marijuana retailers are subject to the local marijuana tax created under the 2017 Act. So that 3% tax that the local municipalities can apply, it's only to retailers. So the way we're taxed in Massachusetts is you have 6.25 sales tax, 10.75 excise tax on all marijuana products. You have the optional 3% local tax. Where we at? Where my math was at? We had 20%. And then there's an optional direct impact fee, which is not a tax. It's a direct impact fee that the municipality may add to your municipality. And 98% of them have chosen to add it. So just to Massachusetts, you're paying 23%. You're paying 23% of your taxes. So this is crazy. And then not to scare you guys, I mean, it's great that we have Democrats in office. What that means for you as an operator is that the corporate tax that was just reduced to about 21% might go back to 30, might go to 40. So in terms of being a marijuana operator, we get really we get the short end of the stick here. Okay, so what did we do? We chose our team, we chose our business type, right? Right, we know the 10 business types and we know how taxes impact those decisions. Now we're about to choose our business structure. How are you going to run your business? Are you going to do a sole proprietorship? Is it a corporation? Is it an LLC? And two of these are tricks. I would never tell you to do two of them. But let's get into it. So Massachusetts, in order for you to operate a marijuana business here, your business has to be registered in Massachusetts. So you can't be a business registered in California doing business here. But you guys are like, Lori, how is it that these multi-state operators are running businesses all over? They're just licensing deals. They come here, they register the business, and they use the same name here. And the types of entities permitted, you can have a domestic corporation or another domestic entity. You're not allowed to do a sole proprietorship, meaning that you own it and you pay the taxes on your own, because the tax liability is so great, you guys. You do not want to be responsible if your company is unable to pay taxes, because then they come for your house and they can add 20% to any underpayment fee. It's just too scary. So I always tell people you should do either corporation or an LLC, right? Corporation, corporate formation. What should I do? Should I do an LLC or a corporation? Well, if you do an LLC, what's the benefit? You can have an unlimited number of members. It's passed through. This is what I don't like. Pass-through means that these taxes, you're responsible for your taxes. Even though you're shielded from liability from anything else, like if somebody sues the business for something, they're not coming for you, but you're responsible for paying the taxes on your own if you choose to leave it as a pass-through. You can elect to do to be taxed as a corporation if you're an LLC, or elect to be taxed as an S corp. But I would never elect to remain as a pass-through as an LLC, because I would not want to be responsible for any underpayment for taxes. It's too crazy. It's too risky. But some people like taking risks, and the bigger the risk, the bigger the rewards. But other benefits to forming an LLC: they're easier to form and less formality. You don't have any citizenship requirements in your annual, and no annual meeting or minute book requirements. If you're a corporation, on the other hand, there are typically two types: S corps and C corps. They're costlier and more burdensome to run. You have to adopt bylaws. You have to formally define your roles of officers and directors. You have to keep detailed records. You have to recommend companies that sell products and have employees. It's not recommended for it's recommended for companies that sell products and have employees. It has the widest range of tax deduction and expenses of all entities. The biggest deduction is double taxation, meaning that the company, the corporation pays taxes, and when they pay you, you pay taxes on your employment, on whatever they pay you. So that's what they call double taxation. But the risks are so great in cannabis that I would always form either a corporation or an LLC taxed as a corporation. Let's see. I'm going to keep going. Again, these are just terms that, you want to include in your operating agreement. If you have an LLC, terms you'd want to include in your shareholder agreement. I will be sending you these slides so we don't have to harp on them. But if you do have questions, I can come back to them, because this is your show. I'm just here to support you. All right. Are we ready to move on? Bueno. So what's the fourth step? We're more than halfway done. This is great. The fourth step is, now that you figured out who your team is, what your business is about to be, how are you gonna get taxed, what the business entity structure is, you got to get this thing funded, right? We got to get some money. But we already know, before we even get into the securities laws, we already know that because marijuana is still federally illegal, banks are still not really participating in this industry when it comes to lending. There are a lot of banks that are providing money management, and I think there's maybe 3 or 4 banks that I've spoken to that do have lending opportunities, but it's not easy to get. You still have to raise a lot of funds up front. Usually it has a $20,000 down payment depending on the size of the loan. So there's still some upfront money that you need to get. And these banks are not going to loan to you until you're at a certain point, like when you get a provisional license. And to get a provisional license, what was one of the first steps for you to apply? You need to have a piece of real estate. So how are you going to pay rent? Sometimes $15K a month to hold you see what I mean? It's just really, really, really difficult if you don't come from money. All right. But I'm not gonna keep complaining, because we're solutions based, right? So there are no banks. Does that mean that we don't have access to any money? No. We can go to private funding, right? And that's the only way we've been able to raise funds, is by going to folks who are accredited investors and who have access to a lot of money. Now, there's a lot of risks in raising money in the private market, because there are securities laws that require you to make these expensive filings if you're going to do a public offering. And in the state of federal illegality, no one wants to get the Securities and Exchange Commission involved in our business. So what people have been doing is they've been doing a lot of things called private offerings, and I will go over that. But before we get into it, let me explain to you what the securities laws are and how they came to be. So before I can even get into that, it's story time. You coming with me? Let's go. So what happened in 1929? Do you guys remember? I mean, not that you were alive, but in 1929, we had the stock market crash. Remember, October 24, the stock market crashes. Why? It sent us into the Great Depression. What a lot of people don't know, the reason why the stock market crashed was because there was rampant fraud in the sale of securities, in the sale of stocks, in the sale of shares in businesses. So as a result, public confidence sunk, and no one was investing in the market anymore. and the market took a tremendous blow. People started taking their money out of banks, and there you go. So when the stock market crashed, Congress was like, yo, we have to do something. So they organized a hearing to find a solution. Based on the findings in these hearings, they passed the Security Act of 1933. And then in 1934, they established the Security and Exchange Commission to enforce this newly passed securities laws. And the purpose was to promote the stability of the market. Now, remember, I told you the reason the market crashed is because people kept lying. People were capping on the viability of their businesses when they went to sell it to you. Literally, what would happen, you guys? There would be door-to-door salesmen that would come to your house. They would say, I have this business in New York, and it's gonna be the biggest blah blah. And they would sell this business to you, and it would actually not be a real business. They would take your money and abscond with it. And that was happening so much that people became tremendously afraid of investing in the market because there was no protection in place for them. So when they wrote the Securities and Exchange laws, the main purpose was companies that were publicly offering securities, shares in their businesses, etc., for reinvestment dollars had to tell the public the truth about their businesses before you were allowed to lie. Also, they had to tell the truth about the truth about their businesses, the securities they were selling, and the risks involved in investing. I mean, obviously there was always fraud laws involved, but you literally were not held to the standards of the securities laws. Okay, so people, it also was meant to help people who sell and trade securities. It was requiring them to treat investors fairly and honestly and put investors' interests first. So that was the main two purposes of the securities laws. And what does the law prevent? So it's unlawful. It is illegal for you to do any transaction with any security without registering it first with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the general law is, if I have a business, a marijuana business, and I'm looking for investors, and I'm selling shares in my business in exchange for money, I have to register it with the Securities and Exchange Commission. But that's in general. However, there are some exemptions that will allow me to be able to engage in those types of transactions without getting the SEC involved. Y'all interested in learning about them, or have you heard about those? Okay, let's talk a little bit about it. So if you are going to do a public offering and you have to register, you're filing this thing called a registration statement that includes a prospectus. And what you're filing to the federal government, you're going to tell the government what your business model and your objectives are. You're going to tell them your company's properties and your business. You're going to talk about the security to be offered with shares, stocks, the different types, classes of stocks, information about the management of the company. You're going to provide your company's financial data that had been certified by an independent accountant. You see, cha-ching, it's expensive. Through thorough discussion of the risk factors involved in your business and description of how proceeds will be used in the dividend policies. The reason why they're asking for all this is if you want to invest in a business, wouldn't you want to know all this? Wouldn't you want to know the financial risk? Would you know who's running it, like their history, how long they've been in the game, what they're finding, how has the business been doing last year? Has it done before? So you want to know all this stuff, or what are your projections? So that's why they did this. Now you see the purpose of this. What they were frauding people, lying people. They were providing them information. The government says if you're going to do a public offering, you have to provide people information. Yeah, y'all with me? Good. So registration statements, they're all public. So you can literally, a lot of times people are like, man, I have questions about forming my business and starting it. There's this website called Edgar. Edgar is where it's the government website where all of these prospectus, all of these registration statements are uploaded. So you can literally go and see Apple's financial statement and see who's running it, how they're running it, what Apple considers to be their risk in the next year or in the previous years. And that'll help you develop your mindset. You can also do that for any publicly traded marijuana business. And now you're literally learning about your competition. So it's called Edgar. So at this point, you're like, Lori, what's a security? Judging by this long definition, the drafters of the regulation didn't know what it was either. They're like, I don't know what it is. I'm gonna throw everything in there. But in general, a security is a note, it's a stock, it's a security future, it's a bond, it's evidence of indebtedness, it's an investment contract. A security, you guys, for you to not to be safe, think about this. Anytime somebody gives you money and they walk away, without having much control over the business, you got yourself a security. Okay. But if the person has some control, then typically it's not a security. But even if it's a note, like a debt, that's a security. But there are a lot of, so but at this point you're like, man, how are these people raising money if they have to draft these expensive prospectus? Well, like I mentioned before, there are some exemptions. These exemptions, if you satisfy and qualify for them, you do not have to you don't have to file these expensive it prevents you from needing to register. So first is a private offering to a limited number of persons or institutions, offerings of limited sizes, intra-state offerings, meaning that these are offerings that happen only within one state. You don't go outside of the state, and then securities of municipal, state, and federal governments. um where am I? So now at this point, you're like, which securities laws apply to me? I did this quick graph, and let me explain to you. There are 3 securities rules that apply to people when they're trying to raise money for a marijuana business. First, let's talk about Rule 504. Rule 504 says you can raise $1 million within any 12-month period, and you can have an any type and number of investor, and you don't have to tell anybody. So if you're trying to raise money for your business and you need just $1 million, you ain't got to tell nobody. Okay. So there's no registration requirement, nothing. And so this would be good for somebody trying to start a retail store, maybe even a craft marijuana shop. But if you're trying to do a cultivation facility, even a 5,000 square foot facility is going to cost you about $3 million, which takes you out of this within the 12-month period. So then if you're like, man, I need more money because my facility is product manufacturing and cultivation, and you need to raise that 5 million, and you need to raise up to 5 million within a 12-month period, then you would go to Rule 505. Rule 505 is a little different now. It says that you can there are these groups of people called accredited investors. An accredited investor is an investor who's basically a very rich person. It's somebody it's somebody who either has $200,000. I'll give you the real definition, but it's somebody who's, I think their net worth is like $1 million outside, excluding their home. So outside of your personal home, you have a net worth of $1 million, or you have I think you make $200,000 of income a year. Don't quote me on the exact numbers. For your purposes, it's a person who's really rich. And when you're going through it, if you have any investment contracts, you want to have somebody attest and certify that they are actually accredited. So you can offer it to an unlimited number of accredited investors, but only to 35 non-accredited investors if you're using Rule 505. You follow me? Does that make sense? Because think about it, the accredited investors are rich. They can afford to take the risk with their money, but they're trying to protect the non-accredited investors, those who may not be as savvy, may not have as much experience with money. Now let's get to Rule 506. Now say you want to open a gigantinormous facility in Massachusetts where it's going to require more than $5 million in that 12-month period. Well, they have this other category called a sophisticated non-accredited investor. What makes somebody sophisticated? You're sophisticated by virtue of your knowledge. That's somebody who may not be very rich, but because of their experience, because of their education, they fall into the category of sophisticated, meaning that they're not going to get played by this investor. Like for example, I'm a lawyer. I may not be rich, but I know how to read a contract. I know how to assess my risk. So I would fall into a sophisticated non-accredited investor, and I could invest in your business. Does that make sense? So you can have an unlimited number of accredited investors and 35 sophisticated non-accredited investors. You following? All right. So let me summarize it. So you're trying to open a little tiny shop, not tiny, but a small size shop. You're looking at Rule 504. You want to raise $1 million within a 12-month period. You can basically raise it from anybody and you're fine. However, Once you start getting into larger amounts, you want to raise 5 million within 12 months, you can give it to an unlimited number of accredited investor, meaning the rich people, and 35 non-accredited. But in Rule 506, where there is no cap on the amount that you can raise, you can have an unlimited number of accredited investors and 35 sophisticated non-accredited. And that makes sense because if you're raising that much money, you want those individuals who are participating to be savvy enough to understand the complexities of that deal, right? Who knows? So let's see what I had here. Typically, when you're bringing on investors, you do that with the various documents. These aren't the other only ones, but I wanted to highlight some common documents you'll see. You'll see a private placement memorandum, because what I was just talking about were the private placement, private offering rules. So this private placement memorandum basically talks about the objectives, the risk, the terms of the investment involved. It's unlike a business plan because it details investment opportunity and disclaims legal liabilities and explains the risks of losses. I've never used one of these, but I've raised money in unconventional ways. A subscription agreement is what would happen. You would give to somebody to purchase shares in your business. It's actually a sales contract. And you'll also run into an escrow agreement, which is when you have an individual holding money or holding property for you as you negotiate or as you go through certain aspects of opening your facility. I'm not going to go over this right now. I will let you guys read this, but it's really good stuff. You're like, Laura, you made it. Are you bigging yourself up? If I ain't gonna shout myself out, who's gonna shout me out? You guys are all on mute. All right. So what's the fifth step? Okay. Because now we got the shmoney, and I told you we need real estate. And so the next step is identifying suitable real estate. What makes real estate suitable? Well, remember I started off by saying there are 351 cities or towns in Massachusetts, and each one of them have their separate different rules as to how marijuana businesses are treated in their municipalities. If you don't remember, that's great. That's the beauty of this thing. I told you I'd repeat things. So yes, there's 351 cities and towns. Each of them have their own way of treating marijuana. So when you want to find real estate, my recommendation is to go on the CCC Municipal Zoning Tracker. I've put a link to it. This is a page where the Cannabis Control Commission basically lists all the cities and towns, and it lets you know whether they have an ordinance in place for marijuana or not. And there's a link to that municipality's webpage, but it's not to their marijuana page. So you're going to have to do some digging. So you go and you pick your top 10 towns, and you go into those towns' ordinances, and you read and see where you're allowed to put your businesses. Can it be a commercial business? Can it be a retail? Does it have to be industrial? You have to find out how these businesses are zoned. For example, in Attleboro, you can only be industrial property. You can only use an industrial property, an industrially zoned property. In Boston, it could be commercial, it could be retail. It doesn't really matter as long as it's not residential. So you have to know how the property is zoned in order for you to and for it to qualify. Next, you have to make sure that you meet the buffer zone requirements. On the state level, the Cannabis Control Commission says marijuana businesses cannot be within 500 feet of a school that's K through 12. So when you first go in, you're like, okay, I'm going to the town. I know I'm looking for, commercial properties. Next, how far are they from schools K through 12? And I'll tell you right now, some cities and towns even say parks or places where children commonly congregate. I had this property once. The town made me move because I was next to a dog park. Now, I thought they were called the children dogs because I'm like, I don't understand why dogs going in a place would prevent. It's not like the dogs have money to buy my weed anyways. Like, what's the deal? But well, it's because dogs attract children. But we ended up finding a better location anyways. But nonetheless, you have to be mindful of what's near you. In addition, some cities and towns say that you can't be within a certain distance of another marijuana business. For example, in Boston, you can't be within half a mile of another marijuana business. In certain places, it's like 300 for retail, 500 for marijuana cultivation. So it's different for each town. So now you have your location. Step 6, the municipal aspects. Let's get into them. Remember I told you you have to host a meeting? You need to have a community outreach meeting where you invite the neighbors to come and learn about the business that you intend to conduct in that particular location, that piece of real estate that you found. This business has to be conducted no greater than 6 months before you file your application. If it exceeds 6 months, you're going to have to do it all over again. So it's important for you to time this meeting a little bit before you're about to submit your application. At this meeting, you discuss the marijuana establishment that's proposed, some of the security policies you're going to in place in that location, steps you're going to have to prevent diversion to minors, your plan to positively impact the neighborhoods that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. You're also going to tell them like how you intend to not be a nuisance. You know, how are you going to prevent noise, odor, dust, fumes, etc., from escaping from their properties and going into their properties? At these meetings, the public has to be able to ask questions. You can't just shut them out, even though you're gonna fight the urge. All right. Notice, you have to send notice. You have to mail notice at least you have to put notice in a newspaper at least 14 days before the meeting and mail that notice to neighbors within the 300 feet radius. You also have to provide notice to the city clerk, to the planning board, any contracting authority for that municipality, and the local licensing authority. So I talked about the community outreach meeting. You also have to get a host agreement. And like I mentioned, the process for obtaining a host agreement is different from city to city. For example, I have a host agreement in Attleboro. The process for obtaining that is talking to the mayor. And if the mayor thinks that your business plan is good, he'll execute an agreement. There's no formal application. In Worcester, you have to submit an application, a request for information. Boston, you got to jump through hoops. You got to beat 3 tigers. And then once you beat the tigers, I'm, I'm just kidding, but Boston's really difficult. Boston has like 19 million steps. Okay, I need to stop exaggerating. Boston just has has a lot of steps. And so the process for obtaining a host agreement in Boston is more difficult. So you just have to really go read the ordinance and find out. And one important thing that all host agreements will have, they will have the conditions that govern your right to operate your business there, including hours of operation, whether you're required to hire people from the neighborhood. It's going to include that direct impact fee that I told you about. Remember I told you they didn't include it in the taxes. We were at 20% taxes, but there was this optional 3% impact fee, up to 3% direct impact fee that they were allowed to impose on your gross annual sales. Whoop, there it is. So the community impact fee would be included in your host agreement. And these agreements can extend no greater than 5 years. So now you have your host agreement. 7th step is you need to let the CCC know how you're going to intend to comply with the operational requirements. So as part of your management and operations profile, you're going to have to submit all of your detailed summaries of your operating policies and procedures. And there they are. You're going to have to talk to them about how you intend to train your agents, the requirements for handling marijuana, marketing and advertising requirements, labeling. You're going to have to draft your policies and explaining to them how you intend to comply with the regulations governing these particular policies. And I've given you that. So are you guys familiar with the Priority Review and Social Equity Program? I know I talked about it a little bit earlier. Are you guys familiar with them? A little bit? A lot of it? You know that the CCC is required to ensure that people from communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs are included in this new legal marijuana industry. And that's the whole purpose for creating the Economic Empowerment Priority Review and the Social Equity Program. Even though the Economic Empowerment, there's priority review where there are 2 groups that have priority. The existing medical dispensaries have priority, and so do economic empowerment applicants. So I think I talked about this earlier, that this was a window that took place in 2018, and there's only 123 of them. But I keep talking about areas of disproportionate impact. Remember, I told you for the social equity program, which is still open, in order for you to qualify, one of the requirements is that you live in an area of disproportionate impact. So these are the areas of disproportionate impact. One thing that's important to note is Boston, Lowell, Springfield, and Worcester, because they're so large, they determined that every aspect of Boston wasn't impacted similarly. So they divided the cities into different neighborhoods, different sections, where some sections are areas of disproportionate impact and others aren't. For example, I live in Hyde Park. I am not in an area of disproportionate impact, but literally like a mile up the street in Mattapan, that's an area of disproportionate impact. So it is what it is for now. The social equity program I mentioned, you, that's one of the requirements. Uh, that's it. I told you, if you're social equity, your economic empowerment, you have exclusivity for delivery, and that's major. I don't know if you guys are following what's happening with delivery right now, but some of the major corporations that have spent millions of dollars navigating the licensing process are angry that they are going to have to compete with delivery companies that didn't have to, they're probably not going to have to spend as much. And so they're suing the state. So we'll see how that goes. It's pretty funny because a lot of people say that they care about what happened with the war on drugs, and it really pains them that there are kids that are still being dragged to prison. But when the government takes steps to kind of balance out the playing field, they're the same ones who are getting on the phone and calling their lawyers and asking them to draft lawsuits. So it's interesting and it's funny, but that's life. Life is funny. All right, licensing. So when I'm talking about licensing, I'm talking about the CCC. Because as you notice, what I say, for you to navigate the this process, there's 4 steps on the local level and 3 on the state, basically. We went through the local, right? We talked about real estate, didn't we? We talked about that community outreach meeting. We talked about the host community agreement. And we also talked about the plans to comply with local zoning ordinance. I didn't go too deep into it because it differs from city to city, town to town. But I did my job by telling you it differs from city to city, town to town. All right. Okay. So now we have all of that. We got our money. We got our real estate. We did all that part, all that stuff. We're ready to go to the CCC to submit our application. So now the license application it's on a rolling basis. They don't have a cap on the number of businesses that they're going to allow in Massachusetts. So you can keep applying so long as the local municipalities are issuing host agreements that do not violate the CCC regs. The application has 3 sections. It has an application of intent. It has background checks and management and operations profile. Like I mentioned, the application of intent is where you tell them who you are, where your business is going to be, and who's running it. The background check packet is where you provide them information sufficient to make sure that you're suitable. Remember when we were picking our friends, we were picking the pedics, we went through all the suitability. Well, this is where they're going to figure out whether you have a mandatory disqualification or a negative presumptive disqualification. This is where they do that. It's with the background check that they conduct. They also conduct your they also audit your taxes for the last 3 years. And I think they're trying to see if you pay your taxes because you gotta pay Uncle Sam. Okay, management and operations profile. This is where you submit those detailed written policies and procedures that are going to let the CCC know that you understand how to comply with the statutes and the regulations. And you're also going to let them know who's managing this business. Who are the pedics really? The CCC will grant or deny your provisional license within 90 days after providing a complete application. So you could submit your application, but that doesn't mean that it's complete. They're going to send you feedback. Like it's very rare for you to get it right on the first time because different people review them. So what's good for one person might not be good for another person. So you just got to wait for them to give you the request for more information, fulfill that. But ultimately, once you've provided them everything and they've deemed it complete, within 90 days, you should receive either an approval or a denial of your license application. In the meantime, while this is marinating, they're sending a letter to the municipality where you claim to have received the host agreement to ensure that you've complied with every requirement that they have on that level for licensing. If the municipality fails to respond to the CCC within 60 days, the CCC will presume that the municipality approved, and then you can move forward to that to your to having the CCC vote on your application, the commissioners vote on your application. So a provisional license does not allow you to actually have any marijuana on your property. What it does is it allows you to submit your architectural plans. If accepted, you'll then be allowed to begin constructing or renovating your facility. If your facility does not need to be renovated, your provisional license will allow you to request that an inspection be conducted of your facility so that you can move forward with your final license. Once you've built out your facility, the CCC is going to come and inspect it. If you pass inspection, you'll be issued a final license. The license lasts for 1 year and it must be renewed at least 60 days before the expiration of the license. And ladies and gentlemen, that is all. That's how you get your license. Let's go back to it. We got 7 steps. What did we do? We picked our friends, right? You choose the PEDICs. You identify who the persons or entities having direct or indirect control in your business are. Next, what do? We chose our business type. We know there are 10 different types, and we know in order for us to decide which business we're going to take, we're going to think about taxes. Are we scared about taxes? Are we not scared about taxes? Do we care about retail? Do we not care? We got to figure all that out. Next, what did you do? So we chose our friends, chose the business and the business type. Then we chose the business entity structure. Do we want a corporation? Do we want an LLC? I already told you, I prefer an LLC taxed as a corporation because of taxes. But we also know that with the change in power, taxes might go up for corporations. After that, what did we do? We got some money. We're like, we need to raise some funds. So we went and we learned about the securities laws. After getting money, what did we do? We found a piece of real estate. After finding a piece of real estate, we found out how to comply with the local zoning ordinances. After finding how to comply, we then submitted all of we then did our local municipal work, right? We got our community outreach meeting, we got our host agreement, and then we submitted our application to the state. Does that sound easy? It is easy. Why? Because once you put it in your mind, you can break it into small steps, and those small steps are easy. Okay, so now you guys, I am opening up the floor for the questions. Where we at? So for let's see, a business is required for every town, yes. And by business, you need a business license. You need a license and a host agreement in every town. So every town has its own host agreement process, and you have to go through that town to get to obtain a host agreement. So it's not ubiquitous. And funding, it's not all cash. I mean, obviously people can give you property. Somebody can give you a piece of property. Yeah, so, but in terms of like, I'm not sure other forms. I know some questions in the beginning. What are the benefits of being a veteran in this state? Now, I mentioned economic empowerment. I mentioned social equity, but the government, the CCC has this thing called expedited review. So when you submit your application to this Cannabis Control Commission, the way that it's reviewed, the order in which these applications are reviewed is as follows. First, they'll take all the priority applicants. So they'll take economic empowerment and the existing medical dispensaries, and they'll review those on an alternating basis, like one EE, one RMD. When they're done with all these applications, they then go to a second group, which are the expedited review candidates. Once they're done with the expedited review candidates, They then go to the general applicants, which is anybody who does not qualify for economic empowerment, social equity, or expedited review. And expedited review is given to people who are veteran owned, 51%, women owned, minority owned, and somebody who persons with disabilities who own these properties. So being a veteran does give you that benefit where you have expedited review, where you have speed to market. That's one part. And then we talked about monopolizing off your properties. Now, after this conversation, you understand how valuable it is to have access to commercial property. And if you do have access to commercial property, feel free to hit me up because I'll be more than happy to talk to you. It's hard for me to help people with this process if they don't have real estate yet. All I can do in that stage is kind of tell you how to go look for it. But until you've secured it, it's there's really no work for me to do. I can't provide you SOPs or anything like that. So feel free to reach out if you want to navigate this a little bit more. So the transporter license, the way it works is you get a warehouse, and you can do a few things. So all businesses are going to be cultivating, making infused products. But these businesses don't want to be transporting their own product to other businesses like me. I'm making infusions in Worcester, but I don't have a car or a truck that's going to take my products and bring it to the distributor. So that's one of the things that the transporter license allows you to do. It allows you to pick product up, pick cannabis up from one business and carry it to another business, which is vital. Part two, you can then buy products from cultivators and product manufacturers in order for you to sell them to these businesses, right? Because retailers, they're trying to find the hottest products on the market. If you are the transporter and you also have access to the hottest products on the market, you're killing two birds with one stone. And it's that efficiency in the service that I'm really looking for as a owner of a dispensary. Does that make sense? Any more questions?
You said if you want the transportation license that you also need a warehouse, correct?
Yeah, you need a warehouse. I mean, I wouldn't say you need, yeah, you do need a warehouse. It doesn't have to be big though. You could have like a small, tiny little warehouse. It's like 1,000 square feet. 500 square feet. It could be very small. Especially if in the beginning, all you intend to do is pick up product and deliver it directly to another business. If all you're doing is being DHL, then it's not important that you have a large space. And I'll give you guys another thing. In Massachusetts, most cities or towns have capped their retail licenses. All cities have the right to cap retail licenses to be 20% of the liquor licenses that they have in that city or town. So for example, in Worcester, they can only have 15 retail stores. Attleboro, I think it was 4. Springfield, I think it was 4 too. So it's based on the number of liquor stores that they have. They can cap it at 20%, and most of them have. What they haven't done, you will not find many towns capping the other types of licenses. So it's a lot easier to get host agreements for transporter because it's not customer facing. Product manufacturing, all those other places, it's a lot easier to get host agreements for them because they have less resistance and they don't have caps. Is there a process to obtain clients to transfer? Yes. I mean, it's basically cold calling, like traditional sales. Like you have access to all of the dispensary owners, all of the cultivators, all of the product manufacturers. It's about you figuring out how to get your business to them. You know their information, their email is online, their businesses are online. It's about getting a sales team to them, and it's going to be marketing. But you can definitely do it, especially if you are a minority owned business, economic empowerment or diversity or social equity. Every marijuana business in the state is required to have what we call a diversity plan. And that's a plan where they tell the CCC how they intend to ensure that the industry is diverse and inclusive. A lot of people are making promises like, I'm gonna get 20% of all of my product from diverse groups, all of my products from social equity. And if you look at the rate of these companies in the state, product manufacturing cultivators, not many of them are owned by people of color. Not many of them are owned by women. Not many, they're not owned by any of the of those categories. So if you just happen to be in the industry, plus you're good, plus you're diverse, you're gonna be what they say, caking, right? So it's a great time to be alive if you can get funding. It's like there are these tremendous barriers to entry, but once you in the club, you can party.
And so you said, so how many, I'm just wanted to ask, how many licenses do you have? Like, would you be able to be a PEDIC and a transporting license company?
How many do I personally have?
Yes, and would you be able to be a PEDIC on a transportation company?
Right. So I have 3 provisional licenses, and 1 pre-certification, and I am permitted to be a PEDIC in another business. But I'll tell you one thing, I never really take parts in people's businesses because I'd rather you have it. Like, I'm giving you something that I've done thousands of times. It's so much easier for me to do it than you because I've done it so long and it looks heavy for you, but it's not. So for me to take a piece of your business to do this work, I find it to be stealing. Like a dead ass. I'll work with you. I'll help you get your transportation business. I'll take some guap if needed. Even when there are instances I can't even wait for you to get open if you have a group of people. Like if it's like 5 and I'm teaching a class, then I'll do it for free. So like there are ways to get this done, but I wouldn't don't ever give people your business.
Quick question. With the delivery license, you're housing products and you're delivering directly to consumers?
Yep.
Okay,
So with
so
that
and then
yeah, there are 2 types. There's the courier, which is like Uber Eats,
Mhm.
and then there's the wholesale delivery license, where you're allowed to act kind of like a transporter, where you're allowed to have a warehouse. You can repackage products, meaning rebrand them, and deliver them directly to your consumers.
Oh, so when I think about that, that seems like the best of both worlds, right? I can
Oh
shop
yeah,
around, I can buy products from across the state, put my own labeling on them, and then without even having to have actual storefront, I can deliver straight to consumer.
absolutely. And even though in my company we have a delivery license, I don't want to be doing logistics. Like I'm serious. What I
Yeah.
want to do is I want to be providing people the ability, like providing people product. I already know for a fact, you guys, people are really mad about these delivery licenses in this exclusivity period. I know for a fact, and I've heard it, there are going to be separate prices for social equity and economic empowerment applicants than for those who are general applicants. If you catch my drift.
Like the
You're
price for the license, the price to
no,
actually
no,
apply
for the
for it?
product, for the product.
Okay.
You get your delivery license and you're buying wholesale. Your wholesale price going to be a lot different than somebody who doesn't have a delivery license. And that's because they want your business to fail. Because you see what I mean? So that's why for me with my business, I know I can get product because I'm a product manufacturer. I'll be able to get it mad cheap, get pre-trimmed products and then create it for people who otherwise are going to get robbed in these streets.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But to bifurcate that, start getting relationships. If you call people, you show up, you form relationships. That's how you bifurcate a lot of some of the barriers that exist. A lot of I think a lot of the reasons why we've gotten so far is because my business partner Ulysses likes to pop up on people. Like literally, he won't announce himself. He will just pop up and catch you off guard. And because you weren't ready, you're in your truth.
Don't give people time to kind of plan their,
You don't.
Yeah,
And the thing about a face-to-face, you can't beat it. There's something
exactly.
about looking at a person in the eye and them having to lie to you in your eyes. It takes a different kind of person. So I'm all about a pop-up.
Do you have any idea of what the price is for that delivery license? Like the actual fee for applying?
Um, it's so I think it's free. Because if you're a social equity or economic empowerment applicant, the application is free. I think the annual fee, I can't remember what it is. It might be like 5,000 or 10,000
Got you.
annually, but nothing crazy.
Okay, cool.
Is there a need for retailers to need a transportation service as opposed to like going wholesale? So that way you don't have that issue with like, that barrier you say where they make the price higher for you? Because now you're dealing with retailers and they have this need, so then you can just charge them that fee for transportation
Are you
without
talking?
incurring the cost of buying wholesale. You're working with retailers.
So you're talking about delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah, delivery directly to, yeah. It's hard because transportation, whenever I hear transportation, I'm thinking business to business. Delivery, business to consumers. So business
Oh,
to,
okay. I understand.
yeah. So business to consumers, that model where you're going and you're buying product from them at retail and then delivering it for others, you become effectively like Uber Eats. And remember, I told you that tax rates are upwards of 70%. Delivery is treated as a retail transaction. So you're looking at an effective tax rate of 70%, and you're making one trip, and it's like, how much are they paying you? Like $10 per trip. So you've already given the government $7. You're left with three. And you can't pack your car with products and hope somebody calls you. No, you can only deliver pursuant to an order. And you can only, what's in your car has to be stuff that has orders attached to it. So they made they call it the courier model. That courier model is financially not feasible. I've spoken to many CPAs about it, and because of the state of the of IRS code 280E, it literally makes it extremely difficult to be a viable business operating on that courier. Like like if Uber Eats had to do the same thing, they would in cannabis, they wouldn't be able to function because the taxes are too great. So I would recommend doing a wholesaler. And honestly, like I expose fear, but understand that tyranny never sleeps. Like, yeah, they're increasing wholesale. If it wasn't increasing the wholesale prices, it would be something else. Okay. We are not the kinds of people who get slowed down even by a little impediment, right? We're gonna get creative because that's just one. Those are just the big MSOs. We also have to know that there are other companies. There are some black ones, some minority owned ones that are coming up and that actually don't want to harm the market. They actually want to see the social equity and economic empowerment applicants prosper. So there are going to be people where you're going to be able to get product from at a good price. This is why I'm saying it's important to form relationships. It's hard it's hard to go networking during COVID, but these people, their names are available on the Cannabis Control Commission website. It's nothing for you to pick 10 a day, 10 cultivation facilities a day to send them an email saying, yo, bro, do you want to talk to me? But I'll tell you right now, if you email me and you ask me to chat, odds are I will not have the time to speak to you. It's just very, very difficult. But do you know what I always say yes to? If you have a podcast and you're like, Lori, do you want to jump on? I'll always say yes, 99% of the time. So my advice to you guys, if you're trying to start into this industry and you're trying to build relationships, start a fucking podcast. It's so easy. You just record. It's like the nuttiest thing. You just record on anything. Record on your phone. There's this website called Anchor, Anchor. You upload your audio onto Anchor, and Anchor puts it on all the podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all of them. And because you have that, A, you're building your brand as a business, right? By creating content that's valuable. B, you're creating relationships by being in the room with the decision makers. C, by the depth of the conversations you ask, it shows how much homework you've done, how intelligent you are, right? And so now you can start talking about deals. So that's my little marketing. No, didn't nobody ask me for it, but I'm gonna give it to you anyways. Advice. Does anybody have any more questions? This is great. And this is this is definitely my contact information. So you have any question, I'm happy to jump on, set up a time to chat.
Thank
I
you
have
so
one
much,
last
Victoria.
question.
Sorry.
Is there anything preventing a delivery business from getting it from people who, I know people can grow it in their own homes, but that's not regulated. So, but I just want to make sure that it's not possible for people to deliver or like buy from people who grow in their homes.
So not in adult use. In adult use, you're not allowed to do that. You can only buy marijuana from a licensed cultivator. Now, in medical marijuana, that's a different set of regulations. And they have these things, these people called personal caregivers. A personal caregiver can cultivate marijuana on behalf of others, if they have hardship cultivation, and they could sell that. And I think they just increased the number of patients that a caregiver can have. So that's the only way. But caregivers don't interact with adult use very much. So you'd be forced to go to the market to get your product.
But what is the do you know what are the qualifications to become someone's caregiver, if any? And like what is the process
Yeah,
of
you have to
getting
be 20,
actual
you have to be
documents?
21.
That's the only thing. Do you need like a document to
Yeah, you're
sign
21.
the
Yeah, so your
patient?
license. It's not anything crazy.
There's a
I'm not sure.
caregiver
I think you
license.
might even need a background check.
Oh, so I could go on mass.gov and look up like patient caregiver or something and then
No,
figure out how
you
to
got to go to the
become.
Cannabis Control Commission website. The Cannabis Control Commission, they're the ones who issues the medical regulations.
No, but as far as being someone's caregiver.
Yeah, it's the Cannabis Control Commission. What they're the ones
Oh,
who they're the ones who regulate the whole medical marijuana program, including caregivers. It used to be the Department of Health, but in December 31, I think 2019, they transferred over that regulation over to the Cannabis Control Commission. So at first, you're right, it was the massgov.edu/DPH, but now that's been shifted over to the CCC. I hated the medical program because they asked me for $500,000 in liquid assets just to apply. And it would have cost you $31,500 just to apply for the license. And it was $50,000 annual fee per license. And they banned anybody with a marijuana charge from participating in the industry. What kind of sense does that make? So I was really upset with medical. But the benefit of medical, it's the only program that allows you to consume cannabis at 18 legally in the state. If you want to hit that 18 to 21 market, it's medical. 18 to 20 market.
is there any restrictions that you know of if you're a city employee getting any of these licenses?
Boston does not allow you to own marijuana businesses if you have like, I think I don't remember all of the roles, but if you work for the city, if you work for planning, can't remember off the top, but it's a city to city assessment. Boston's definitely one that does not play. But it doesn't mean you can't own it in another town or another city.
I have a question.
But
CC,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Do you think restaurants will be able to sell like food with weed or beer with weed or something like that in the future?
Yes, let me talk about that. I did not talk about the social consumption licenses to any great depth for one reason. Social consumption is a license you're thinking about where you're allowed to sell infused food. People can consume the cannabis on site. The problem is, in order for those licenses to be issued, the Senate, the legislature from Massachusetts has to issue this law that allows the cities and towns to put the question of whether these social consumption sites should be permitted in those jurisdictions on a ballot. So they have to put it on a ballot that takes place on a biennial election. right? So it's not even every year, it's every 2 years that they have this election. And the legislature they basically have to move. So they've been dragging their feet on it. So I don't think that we're gonna see social consumption in the next 2, 3 years, maybe 5 years. I'm hoping it goes faster, but they are not in any hurry to provide them. But I do know in the future they will be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And another thing about them, they don't allow you to serve alcohol. So you could only sell marijuana, and you can't smoke indoors, can vape. You also can't carry out the products. So if you're in a social consumption place and you bought a brownie and you didn't finish it, you've got to throw it out. And that would break my heart. And it also, last thing I'll tell you, because this is the regulations, they wrote them, it's so silly. They have to, right before, when you finish ordering, you're good. Like you go to I go to your marijuana restaurant. And then right before I order my food, you have to hand me a card that I like to call the Buzz Killington card, because it kills your buzz. The card basically says, I understand that marijuana is gonna cause me to get high, blah blah blah. It just gives you all the risks involved with marijuana. Has that ever happened to you going to a bar? Why are they doing this with marijuana? It's so stupid. It makes me mad. Anyways, I'm gonna try to get them to remove that. We are gonna try to get them to remove that when it's time for these businesses to actually be licensed.
Well, is there any other process or barrier to like becoming the licensing for patient caregiving, to cultivate it and to sell it to them?
So
if they have a prescription for it?
Yeah, so the barrier is the only people who can cultivate under medical marijuana are people who've been granted hardship cultivation. You have hardship cultivation if there are no medical marijuana dispensaries around you that deliver to you, or you can't afford to buy cannabis because of financial reasons. And so those are the two main reasons why you can get hardship cultivation. Once you've been given hardship cultivation, you can then cultivate on behalf of those patients.
So it's not like you can sell it to those patients. You could just cultivate it for them to use it for free.
Yeah, but I mean, you're getting paid for your labor for the service. You're getting paid for the service. But
so I can charge them for the service of cultivating it in my home.
Yep.
For them, if they don't have it any accessible in their area and it is hard for them. And do they have to prove that to anyone that it's hard for them, or they don't have it accessible for me to be able to sell it to them?
They have to prove hardship cultivation. They have to prove that they're either too far from the cannabis from the store, or they're too sick to get up and go. They just have to show that for some reason they can't access cannabis, either financially, physically, or for some other reason.
Is there anything I need to acquire those so I can prove that the people I'm selling it to have this impediment? Because I'm sure I can't just sell it to anybody with a prescription. I would if I'm cultivating it at home.
No, you have to be their caregiver.
And then for me to be their caregiver, they have to show it within the application that we have together, me being their caregiver, that
so first it's going to be outside of you. By themselves, they're going to say, CCC, I need a personal caregiver to help me with my cannabis and help me cultivate it. First of all, I'm really poor, I can't afford marijuana, or I'm too disabled, I can't get there. I need a personal caregiver. And I would like the personal caregiver I would also like to have hardship cultivation and the personal caregivers help me with that. So it's many levels. But you're right, you do have to make an application together where they basically assign, hire you as their personal caregiver.
Do you see any money in that and what I'm talking about? Like, is there's like a big profit in that? Like if I have 10 patient caregiver, patients that I cultivate for, and I have this application, it's granted, I'm their caregiver through the marijuana DPH or whatever it's called. And I can charge them this service fee. Because I just don't understand, like, if they can't afford it, then how can they afford the service? Or is
Right.
it, so that means
Because
is
weed
it
is
cheaper?
super
Is it
expensive.
significantly cheaper?
Look, I can't afford weed in those dispensaries sometimes. An ounce is like 350. On the black market, you're looking at 200. You get a bag of Reggie, you're looking at 160. So like even 100. So it's like they can't afford dispensary weed. And when you're growing it on your own, how much is it costing you? To get that pound. So it's a lot cheaper.
I could just get a whole bunch of patients.
But the thing is, like, there's a cap on patients. Literally November 30th, the CCC changed the laws on personal caregivers. That's why my brain's all confused slightly, because I know there's been some new changes, but I haven't spent enough time digesting it because of Thanksgiving, the holidays. Please forgive me. But but in terms of medical, there's been some changes with the medical that they approved on November 30th of this year. So, um, one of the things that they did was increase the number of personal caregivers that one patient could have, the number of patients that one personal caregiver could have. Because before they were capped, I think at one, and they could have unlimited if it's their siblings.
And is there, and if you do that, is there anybody checking in on you at your home to make sure that you're not growing an excessive amount, that you're going by how the laws of how many plants and buds and everything you can have?
Yeah, I think there's an inspection. There are parts where I read the security policies, and you kind of have to. It's intense. Just wait till you're 21, and then you can grow your own weed. Is what I tell. Unfortunately, because like think about it, this only applies to people who are 18 to 20. Once you're 21, then the adult use regulations kick in. Then you can grow weed without the government's involvement.
Because I just think even people who are over 21 may not want to cultivate their own, even at
Yeah.
their own home, even if they can. And if they have a prescription, I'm just wondering if like there's a business in it, if I were to do it like that. But if I guess there's going to be inspection and government involvement in any business you do, but I was just wondering if you knew how intense it was. Do they do random pop-ups like any business where they look at how many plants you have in your
So I
home?
can't tell you if they do random pop-up, but I know they've reserved the right to do random pop-ups, if that makes sense. I don't know if like in their course of dealings they've done it, but they have the right to do that.
And then do you know if there's like an initial one that they do? Like, let's say I acquired 10 patients. Do they do like an initial survey in your home to look at your plants? And then after that, they're like, okay, it seems like you know what you're doing. You're not using crazy pesticides or something,
Right. I would assume, but I cannot be too sure on that. I don't practice too much in medical TB, so I'm not entirely too sure. Lo siento.
One more question. Can you have a transporter license and a caregiver license and resell from the wholesalers to caregivers, so you have to actually grow it?
So now you're talking about two different programs. Medical and adult use are separate, and they don't interact very much. Sometimes they do, but you have to follow these co-located license rules. It's very tough. So they tend to be very, very separate. And even when they are co-located, you have to follow all the medical rules and all the adult use rules. Does that make sense? And so you could be a personal caregiver and do whatever. They don't impact each other. The only thing that impacts you is the cultivation. It doesn't matter if you're in medical or if you're in adult use. You can have 100,000 square feet in the state.
Quick question. Does having your delivery license prohibit you from applying for any other licenses?
Does having what?
Your delivery license, like if
No.
you want to have the wholesale delivery, does that restrict you from applying for any other
only
licenses?
one it keeps you from getting is it'll prevent you from getting independent testing laboratory.
I don't want that anyways, so that's cool.
Yep. That's it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Last question before you get off. If
Yeah,
I start a podcast, would you be interested in coming on?
hell yeah.
All right, awesome. I have your contact information. I'll reach
Yes,
out.
you do. I'm telling you, I tell all my students, my law students, I tell them if you guys are looking for jobs, everybody's sending emails, everybody's getting no feedback from their freaking emails because you're not giving anything back in value. Think about it. You're coming in and you're taking, but if you give me an opportunity and I know I can get the recording, at least I get something in return, and that's for everybody. And that's the way I look at life. I don't like to go into spaces where I don't have something to give you. And a lot of times people think they don't have a lot. You existing, you might have something that just you having the podcast is something. And you having a cell phone, that's all it takes to create this podcast. I'm telling you. And so like you have so much, you have to be creative. You tell me you already have a podcast. I'm on it. And your brand, you need to start branding. It's difficult to brand in this industry because the marketing rules are onerous. They're starting to loosen them up a little bit, but you can't market on most regular platforms. So doing your podcast where you can identify who you're popular, who's listening to it, it's lit. And last one, Massachusetts cannabis industry is just getting started. Your podcast right now would be one of very few marijuana podcasts that are based in Massachusetts. And I'm telling you guys, every single person I meet who I've asked, will you jump on my podcast? They've done it. Like everyone. Obviously, I've not asked Kamala Harris yet. She's my sorority sister. I thought that would mean something, but not in these streets.
Thank you, Lori.
You're
You
welcome.
are awesome. And for anyone else
Thank you so
who
much.
has
You're welcome.
questions about our program or starting a cannabis business, we're actually having a cannabis law clinic in January at some point. So stay in touch for updates on that. And of course, you have the queen herself, Lori's contact information for all things cannabis business. So
Yeah.
thank you all for attending. Reach out if you have questions. We'll be in touch.
Yep.
Good night,
I have one
everyone.
more thing, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I'm launching the legallygreat.com, www.legallygreat.com, and that's going to be an academy where I'm going to provide all of this information about licensing. Obviously, it's going to be more extensive. It's going to be like a 12-week course. There's going to be scholarships available for everybody who can't afford them because I believe that you shouldn't be limited to this information just because you can't afford it. But remember, like I told you, nothing's free. What it's going to cost you is the time of filling out the application.
Exactly.
That's it. But yeah, so that's going to be launching or end of December, early January. And so it's going to be amazing. But my favorite part is that I'm going to talk about energy and how to manifest. How do you remove self-limiting thoughts? Who are you? What is time? What is space? All that shit will be explained to you. For that stuff, I'm probably going to just put it for free because I hate people who make money off energy talk. I mean, I don't hate them. I think you got to do what you got to do, but I just want to give it out for free. So that'll be it. That'll be at the end of January. So peace out, everybody.
Thank you, Lori. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.